Saryu had been single until the age of 35. He was often mocked and nicknamed the Winter Bear. Now he was looking down at his bride, who asked the prince what was wrong. Saryu was sweating because he couldn't believe how cute his bride was. To think that a girl like that is my wife, he thought. His bride had silky silver hair and skin as smooth as an egg. But she looked just as concerned. Did her appearance bother Saryu? Saryu insisted that it wasn't that. He just didn't know what to do because of how cute his bride looked. He told her that he thought someone like him didn't deserve a girl like her. He began to fret, not even sure what to say. A woman with a large hat and elegant fan told him the obvious. Today was the engagement ceremony. The couple were instructed to hold back from any sort of inappropriate behavior until the wedding ceremony in 6 months' time, but from then on, they were to live together. Saryu wondered if he could really keep his sanity within that time frame. 3 months prior, Saryu and his mother had arrived in the kingdom via carriage. That day he was in one of the neighboring countries to attend the engagement ceremony of the crown prince of the luminous kingdom. His mother's purpose was the reception that followed, or at least it should have been. It turned out to be Saryu's arranged marriage. He had a feeling all along that something wasn't right. To think that his mother would bring him her third son instead of the king or crown prince. His mother was worried about the prince. The fact that he didn't have a fiancé yet was a cause for concern. Saryu had an elder brother, Leonidas, who was the crown prince of the kingdom. His second brother, Michaela, was married in another country. Michaela was a beautiful nobleman with feminine features, looking just like their mother. As for Saryu, he took after their father with dark, rugged features. His duty included leading the knights to patrol the frontier every winter. And whilst he fought, he earned the nickname, the Winter Bear of the Tidros. The nickname somewhat made sense back then, as Saryu skipped shaving his facial hair. But because of it, he was avoided by women. His potential arranged marriages were disastrous, with women finding him gross and scary. He sighed, admitting to himself that he was fine with staying single for the rest of his life. He just wanted to end the event peacefully and go home. That was what was meant to happen. But once the crowd arrived at the palace, there was an announcement. The engagement was off. What was the crown prince of the luminous kingdom thinking? The prince had another woman beside him, male. There was chatter that she was the prince's lover. The prince's official fiancée, Sitoen Barimoa, was completely veiled. Saryu had heard that they had been living together for 2 years prior to the engagement, so he couldn't imagine the pain she must be going through. The prince yelled that she had repeatedly committed inhumane acts toward Mail, and that was why he did it. Sitoen had supposedly ignored Mail, and even during tea parties, she treated her like an outcast. Sitoen's behavior hardly surprised Saryu. Firstly, why would someone of lower status try to speak to a royal anyway? And secondly, there was no way a baron's daughter could participate in a royal tea party. Saryu knew that the prince and his mistress were far too naive about the world, not even understanding the customs of high society. Mail whined that she was even bumped into while they were dancing, but Saryu wasn't buying it. More likely, she was the one who bumped into Sitoen. There was an awkward murmur in the hall, and Saryu noticed that all the attendees were looking at the prince with cold eyes. Lady Sitoen had also endured unreasonable accusations. The veiled bride began to walk away. Had she given up? Saryu's name was called by his mother, who mentioned that he didn't have a lover yet. Saryu was confused over the sudden question before confirming that he didn't have one. His mother smirked from behind the fan. She proposed for them to take Sitoen. Saryu's eyes widened at the crazy suggestion. She was talking about the girl like she could be passed around anywhere. The prince said that he could never possibly take someone like that as a wife, calling her heart ugly, her appearance too. He said they were not suited for one another. Saryu had heard enough. He burst out of his seat, calling out the prince. How could he say such nasty things about a woman's appearance? The prince snapped his head towards Saryu in shock. Saryu told him that even though he was the crown prince of another country, what he just said could not be overlooked. Fortunately, the witnesses verbally agreed with Saryu, shaming the prince for his ruthlessness. Sitoen turned to face Saryu. Why was he so quick to help her? Atsuhito was an unfamiliar name, and Saryu wondered what language it came from. Besides, this should have been the first time he and she had met. He looked at the prince and his mistress, knowing that everything he had said was true. A man yelled that the engagement was off before calling the prince a fool. It was his father, and the prince apologized like crazy. Another older gentleman stepped in, telling the king there was no need to apologize. He would take his foolish daughter back with him. He called Sitoen and told her they should return home to the kingdom of Tanya. The kingdom of Tanya was known for its abundance of minerals, and if the engagement was broken off, it would be a huge financial loss. The cheating prince's father must have wanted to do everything in his power to change the outcome, which now seemed impossible. Saryu's mother approached Sitoen's father despite Saryu cringing. What was she doing now? King Noe, the cheating prince's father, greeted her with an embarrassed fluster. Lord Barimoa told her he was honored. The last time he spoke with Queen Tidros was at an evening party. Queen Tidros asked if the engagement was really going to be broken off. Of course, Noe waffled that it would be fine, but Barimoa was steadfast in his decision to return home. Saryu's mother gave the lord an empathetic look. She told him how upsetting it must be, even just to see his daughter mistreated. However, she admitted that she was impressed by Citoyenne's composure. Despite the drama, Citoyenne remained calm. His mother asked the young girl if she spoke Tidros. The girl responded that she was still quite inexperienced, but she spoke enough to get by day to day. Saryu heard her and knew she was being modest. Her pronunciation was really good, as expected of someone raised to be a crown princess. For royalty, learning languages for negotiations with other countries is essential. Mile and the cheating prince listened from afar as the prince held her closely. This angered Saryu, but he knew he needed to keep an eye on his mother, who continued to ask questions. His mother made a proposal to Lord Barimoa, whether it would be possible to welcome his daughter as her foolish son's companion. Saryu could have died of humiliation. A daughter raised to be a crown princess, paired with a third son? That wasn't just lowering her status. Not to mention it was Saryu they were talking about, the winter bear with a losing streak. Was his mother delusional? The lord told her that her words were too kind, but he was a vassal of the king of Tanya. First, he would need to ask the king's intentions and give a formal reply afterward. Still, the lord added that as a father rather than as a noble of the luminous royal family, he would be happy to entrust her to the prince who stood up for her. His words stunned Saryu. As they were about to leave, Saryu called after them. He told the lord that although he didn't resemble his mother or brothers, he had spent most of his life with the Knight Order, so he was not good at handling women. Not to mention, he was the third son, and although he held a duke's title, he couldn't hope for anything more than that. He admitted he didn't have the intelligence to navigate the court well either. Saryu's honesty annoyed his mother, who thought he was trying to ruin a good opportunity. But Saryu knew he needed to be honest with them. He asked them not to decide for the young lady. Even if he were to receive a rejection, he wouldn't be hurt or bothered at all. The lord commented on how Saryu's nickname was well known in his country too. Saryu asked if he meant the part about his losing streak, but the lord hadn't heard of that. Instead, he knew Saryu as the Winter Bear of Tidros. He thanked Saryu again for standing up for his daughter. 2 months passed and a formal engagement proposal came from the kingdom of Tanya. Saryu was stunned, convinced it would be rejected. Then came the furious preparations for the engagement ceremony, and Saryu was hounded by procedures all day and night. In the end, he arrived at the day of the ceremony without having even seen Citoyenne's face. His brothers were pleased that the luminous crown prince had made such a fool of himself that day. They read about Citoyenne, a 20-year-old girl who came from a family that traced back to the Tanyan royal line. 2 years ago, she had come to the kingdom of Luminous for birthday training, but the prince hadn't liked her appearance and their relationship never developed. His brothers laughed, telling Saryu not to get his hopes up about her face. But Saryu knew she probably didn't expect much from his appearance either. Flash forward to the ceremony and Saryu lifted the veil to reveal the cutest girl alive. He almost collapsed from shock. Where was the ugliness? She was incredibly beautiful. He turned to his brothers in panic, asking what he should do with such a beautiful girl. His brothers told him to calm down and, most importantly, not to keep his fiancée waiting too long. Saryu turned to the girl and apologized for losing his composure, but he kept tripping over his words. He knew he needed to kiss her. But he couldn't stop admiring her features. Those big, round eyes. He imagined how soft her skin must be. He tried to stay focused as he leaned in. How would he stay sane with 6 months until the wedding? That night, the engagement party thankfully ended smoothly. Saryu looked at Raoul, who had begun to shed a tear. He told Saryu that he was just happy he was engaged. Raoul, in his 30s and the vice captain of the Knight Order, was reasonably popular, but he struggled with the idea of getting married and leaving Saryu behind. Now he smiled, knowing he could marry without worry. Saryu needed to think about what was coming next. His older brothers had just given him a stern warning not to make any blunders. He was required to live with his fiancée after the engagement ceremony, as per the king's orders. He knew it was probably due to the previous broken engagement, but his brother had teased that it would be disastrous if the bride's belly was big during the blessing. Apparently, Saryu had been smiling from ear to ear at the dinner party, overjoyed with his new fiancée. Raoul also mentioned that she supposedly had a dragon mark, which meant Saryu needed to be even more careful. The kingdom of Tanya was also called the Dragon Country, and dragons were deeply involved in the founding of the nation. Only members of the royal family bore scale tattoos known as dragon marks. So marrying someone with a dragon mark was incredibly honorable. Saryu's butler informed him that they had just received word. Lord Vandal would be paying a visit tomorrow. Saryu was stressed by the news, believing it to be too sudden. Lord Vandal supposedly wanted to congratulate his best friend on the engagement, but Saryu knew he probably just wanted to see him panicking. Saryu knew he needed to speak to Sitoen, and his brothers advised him to keep it brief. It would be best not to look like he was intruding. But even approaching the lady's bedroom made Saryu nervous. He gently knocked and told her that it was only him. She called for him to enter. Saryu opened the door to see Sitoen seated gracefully, looking beautiful as ever. She thanked him for his hard work earlier, but Saryu told her that he had only come to say goodnight. Sitoen asked if she should have come to him instead, but Saryu began to stutter that it was fine. He told her that his friend was coming tomorrow, and she should let him know if she would like to meet him. Sitoen smiled and told Saryu that it would be an honor. Saryu added that if there was anything inadequate about his mansion, she should let him know. But Sitoen was beyond impressed, and her maid Eaton was very grateful too. Saryu remembered Maid Eaton crying her eyes out at the ceremony, clearly so happy for Sitoen. He had heard how poorly they had been treated at their previous residence, where they weren't even given proper meals. Maid Eaton was happy that after 2 years of mistreatment, Sitoen was finally getting what she deserved. But Saryu was surprised that Sitoen didn't appear to be traumatized. She was calm as ever, with a sweet smile on her face. She turned to him, called his name, and thanked him for everything. Not only had he thrown her a lifeline at her previous engagement ceremony, but he had also asked her to be his consort. Saryu admitted that he should be the grateful one. He was a prince only in name, and she was getting engaged to a bear-like man such as himself. Sitoen told him that he was exactly the person she had imagined and that he hadn't changed at all. Saryu was confused by her words. Had they met before? Sitoen asked if it was really alright that it was her in the end, and of course Saryu told her he was more than thrilled. He looked at the clock and remembered what his brothers had told him. He bowed to Sitoen and told her he would excuse himself. Before he left, Sitoen asked if her dragon mark bothered him. Saryu thought that if he said it didn't bother him, then that would be a lie. Sitoen sensed his hesitation and asked if he was disgusted by it. Saryu instantly reassured her and told her he wasn't. He admitted he was curious about what it looked like, but he could never call a cultural symbol that another country cherished disgusting. Sitoen mentioned how she had once heard a gentleman call the mark disgusting, and Saryu was infuriated. He knew he needed to let her know that he was different. He understood that dragons were essential when discussing the kingdom of Tanya, and those with dragon marks were considered precious. He didn't think anything beyond that. He smiled and asked if Sitoen wanted to show him. She blushed at his suggestion and told him she would like to. She clutched her top, and Saryu quickly worked out where the tattoo was. He insisted it was fine, but Sitoen had already unbuttoned her shirt. Saryu hurried out of the room, stammering a good night to Miss Sitoen. When he arrived back in the hallway, he was met by his brothers who asked why he was so flustered. Saryu insisted that it was nothing but a misunderstanding. Meanwhile, Saryu's closest friend was preparing for his journey to meet his friend's new fiancée. Saryu strode through the mansion hallway asking where his friend was. His butler told him that for once his friend was right on time and had already arrived in the guest room. The butler entered first and thanked the gentleman for waiting. Saryu's friend embraced him in a warm hug, practically squashing Saryu in his arms. Saryu told him to get off. His friend named Vandal said he never imagined Saryu would get married before him. He saw the occasion as proof that life was truly unpredictable. Saryu asked if he had any intention of getting married anytime soon. He and Vandal had known each other since military academy. It was what you'd call an old friendship. With Vandal's looks, he should have had his pick of women, or so it seemed. But he turned down every woman he was introduced to, insisting he just hadn't had a fateful encounter yet. Despite Vandal's slender build, he was excellent at flashy close combat. His bloodthirsty fighting style earned him the nickname the Vampire Count. That was what he was called at school, feared by the other students. Vandal smiled, dodging the question. He told Saryu that he'd bought him a wedding gift but didn't know what would be good, so he just picked something at random. A whale skeleton which was already hung up in the guest room. Saryu asked if it was normal for people in Vandal's region to gift whale remains as engagement presents. Vandal admitted he'd never heard of such a thing, but said maybe it was common where Saryu came from. He asked Saryu if he had any work today, and Saryu told him that he had escorted his second brother back to his in-laws. Vandal chuckled, remarking how surprised he was that Saryu didn't struggle to get out of bed the day after his engagement ceremony. Saryu was quick to correct him, explaining that he had been instructed not to lay a hand on his fiancée until the royal wedding parade in the capital. He laughed and said that was a pity. Saryu then mentioned that he'd heard the caravan-allied kingdom was in a predicament. Apparently, they were halting the sale of mining resources. Vandal said that the king was furious with the crown prince of Luminous's kingdom for insulting the girl with the dragon mark. Tanya wasn't the only kingdom that mined resources, but coal, steel, and various ores were meant to be shared within the unity of the allied kingdom. That meant they couldn't just ask other countries for help right away. He explained that King Noe held the position of chosen king, representing the 5 countries, but there might even be a motion to remove him from power. The crown prince had been confined to a room in the royal castle under the guise of house arrest, but it was likely just for show. The punishment would probably be lifted in a few days. Saryu laughed and asked where the beautiful princess was. The one who had started all this? He said that the head butler had gone to fetch her. He mentioned that he didn't know what Vandal might say, which was why he'd met with him alone first. There was a knock on the door, and they both knew it was time to meet Situen. Vandal stood up but immediately lost his balance to the point that Saryu had to step in and help him. Saryu asked if he was all right, and Vandal blurted that he was just eager to congratulate him and had ridden his horse too hard. He told Saryu to move away quickly before his wife-to-be got any strange ideas. Situen entered, standing beside the butler, and saw Saryu on the ground with Vandal. She smiled as Saryu told her it wasn't what she thought. Vandal grinned and told her that he and Saryu were school friends, and that was the extent of their relationship. Saryu looked like he was about to kill him. The butler intervened and told Situen that he had known Vandal for a long time and that there was nothing suspicious about him at all. Vandal stood up quickly and took the lady's hand. He looked into her eyes and told her it was an honor to meet her. He introduced himself as Vandal Sheen from Sheen County. Situen introduced herself as well. Saryu looked irritated in the background as Vandal smiled. Situen looked lovely in a fresh dress. Vandal told her he could understand how his friend fell for her so quickly, but Situen was quick to correct him. She told Vandal that she was the one who had fallen in love. Her words made Saryu turn as red as a tomato. Tea was served and Situen noticed the whale skeleton. Vandal asked if she had ever seen a whale before, knowing that Tanya was a mountainous kingdom and the sea was far away. Situen told him she had only seen a skeletal specimen from her tutor. Vandal was pleased she liked it and complimented her dress. Saryu flashed him a look that could kill. Shouldn't he have been the one to say that first? He quickly interrupted and cleared his throat. He told Situen that her morning outfit had been lovely, but this one was really nice and summery too. He also complimented her beautiful skin. As he rambled on, Vandal smirked while Situen thanked him. She told him that she was very happy and glad she'd worn it. Saryu sighed. He knew that just thinking these things wasn't enough. He needed to say them out loud. He smiled, called her cute, and affirmed that she looked lovely. He could tell these were the words Situen had been waiting for. Saryu knew that even if he couldn't express himself well or if the conversation became tedious, what mattered was shaping his feelings and handing them to her. It was a bit frustrating that Vandal was the one who made him realize that. Speaking of Vandal, he now looked white as a ghost. Saryu asked if he was feeling well, but Vandal insisted he was just tired and had been pushing himself too hard lately. Situen asked if she could say something. She said that perhaps Vandal was... Situen suggested that Lord Vandal perhaps had anemia. Saryu was taken aback by the suggestion, but she explained his symptoms, how his face turned pale and how he collapsed with a whoosh, and also his nails. Vandal looked at his nails in horror, dropping his tea. Lord Vandal's nails were not only spoon-shaped, but also had horizontal ridges. These were commonly seen in people with anemia caused by iron deficiency. Vandal agreed that they were most definitely curved. Saryu laughed and told him that his nails were probably rebellious, just like he was. But now what? Was there any medicine that could help? Vandal mentioned how his doctor once told him to put old nails in wine and drink it. Saryu asked him what his typical diet was like, and Vandal mentioned that pork, liver, or chicken were his main staples. But Saryu was quick to correct him, telling Situen that her friend had always hated meat. Situen asked if he ever ate any fish, and Vandal admitted that he wasn't really a fan of fish either. Situen suggested that bonito would be good for him as it contains a lot of iron. But Saryu complained that the smell was too fishy. Situen didn't stop with her helpful suggestions. She instructed Vandal to mix the fish with herbs and fry it so the smell would disappear. He could also add lemon, which would help the iron absorb into his body more efficiently. If it wasn't anemia caused by internal organ disorders, improving his condition by supplementing with iron was quite possible. She went on to say that drinking wine with nails was also one of the methods passed down from ancient times. If Vandal disliked meat, she also recommended spinach, hijik, seaweed, and soybeans instead. However, the iron contained in plants was harder for his body to absorb, so eating them with fruits or vinegar would increase the absorption rate. Vandal sat as still as a statue, seemingly overwhelmed by the diagnosis. He told Situen that anemia was a womanly disease. Saryu smiled and educated him that there was no male or female when it comes to illness, and he shouldn't worry about looking cool when it comes to his health. Situen smiled, happy to see her partner supporting his friend. She too agreed that there was no gender difference in the pain that comes from illness, and everyone suffers equally. When Vandal's anemia improves, he will feel much better. So for now, they should make an effort to eat nutritious meals. Saryu smiled and told Situen that she was like a doctor. His words made her flustered, and she told him no. She apologized for her giddiness, leaving Saryu unsure of what to say. Vandal asked her if she had any medical knowledge. Did she study medicine somewhere? Was her father a court physician? He asked. Saryu told him that it wasn't true before going silent. She wondered what was wrong with her. He quickly changed the topic, asking if her advice was true. If Vandel were to change his diet, could his anemia be cured? He bit his lip, hoping that he didn't come across as too strong. Sitoen smiled and explained that neither she nor her father were doctors. However, the knowledge she shared should be correct. She asked them to believe her. While there were individual differences, if they followed the advice, then Lord Vandel's condition should improve. Vandel smiled, reiterating that Sitoen was not a doctor, but simply had medical knowledge. He turned to Saryu and asked when the earliest time would be that he could bring Sitoen to his territory. Saryu looked like he wanted to kill him for the suggestion, but he admitted that it would take 5 days to finish his work, and then travel would take at most 7 days. Vandel bowed, telling Sitoen that he would be waiting for her to meet his father. He smiled, telling them that they would meet again soon before leaving. So it was decided Sitoen and Saryu would make the trip to Vandel's territory. Saryu knew he had messed up. An expedition to Count Shin's territory? His brother had asked him why, but Saryu didn't really understand either. Fortunately, their father was in favor of the plan and told his sons he had already heard the story from Count Shin. Though he had gotten approval from his family, there were still disagreements about who would travel with them. While Saryu's guards were more than happy to take care of Sitoen, her maid Eaton had other ideas and insisted on going with her. Saryu explained to Sitoen that the lodging along the way would be at each lord's mansion. It also served as a series of introductions. So the plans were confirmed, and the party departed 20 days after Vandel's visit. Saryu was relieved when he received a reply from the man saying, "It can't be helped," in response to his letter of apology. They reached the mansion and were greeted by a plump old man who was honored to meet the royals. He told them that everyone wanted an audience with the prince. News of the engagement party had spread like wildfire and was inevitably brought up at the gathering. Word had it that the prince had swept Miss Sitoen off her feet, and nothing less was expected of Tidros's winter bear. The man went on to say that rumors were a funny thing and Sitoen was nothing like what had been said about her. When she had been engaged to Prince Arios, she was said to be conceited because of her dragon crest, and she had avoided social events for fear of being looked down on. Rumor had it she was also a spendthrift and struggled with foreign languages. Saryu was enraged to hear such things about his wife and demanded to know who was responsible. Concerned onlookers gathered as Saryu apologized for losing his temper. The old man also apologized for offending him, but Saryu was certain it was Prince Arios who had been speaking ill of Sitoen. The rumors couldn't have been further from the truth. Sitoen was fluent in several foreign languages and had shown no signs of arrogance about her origins. In fact, for the past 2 years she had lived mostly abroad, and had worked hard to learn the local languages. The white veil she wore at the ceremony had looked like a cocoon to Saryu, a symbol of her desire to become someone different than who she was born as. He wondered if she was still wearing it, making efforts to silence her true self. Saryu's brothers mentioned that the new crown princess of Luminous was causing trouble. She was ignorant of current affairs, and when mining resource exports had recently stopped, she had demanded to buy jewels anyway. Apparently she even made a direct appeal to Tanya's resident official. Saryu facepalmed. Until now, Miss Sitoen had been cast in the role of a villain, so the current crown princess had gained popularity. But now that illusion had been shattered. The crown prince of the neighboring country clearly had no eye for people. From afar, Saryu saw Sitoen anxiously inspecting a glass of wine. Her maid rushed to her in concern, and Saryu wondered if something had happened. Raoul walked toward her to make sure she was all right, and Sitoen passed him the glass. Raoul brought it back to Saryu, who asked if the wine was bad. When Raoul passed him the glass to sniff, Sitoen's concern became clear. Sitoen couldn't eat peaches or apples. They caused a severe allergic reaction that had worsened over time. Raoul had sent clear instructions for those fruits to be excluded from the banquet, yet there were peaches in the wine. The butler handed Sitoen the glass and told her to drink it. Thankfully, she had smelled the peaches before taking a sip. Saryu was enraged. Has someone deliberately targeted Sitoen? Raoul told him to stay as close to her as possible moving forward for her own safety. He added that it might be advisable for them to share a room. The thought made Saryu uncomfortable, imagining Sitoen in his bed. In the bedroom that night, Saryu didn't know what to say. He told Sitoen not to pay any attention to him, but Sitoen was just as flustered, telling him that she was the one in the way. They looked at each other awkwardly. Only an hour earlier they had searched based on Eaton's testimony, but they couldn't find the butler who had handed the glass to Sitoen. It was most likely that Miss Sitoen was being targeted, and that was why they needed to stay together. Usually, Saryu could resist Sitoen since they were at least separated most of the time. But now? Saryu told Sitoen he would sleep on the sofa, but she insisted that she would. Saryu could never let a girl sleep in such a place. Sitoen told him she was hardly a girl anymore, and Saryu pointed out that she was only 20 after all. To make matters worse, Sitoen then suggested they just sleep together in the bed. She didn't want Saryu to be uncomfortable. Saryu told her he would stay at the very edge and that she should forget he was there. Despite the awkwardness, the couple decided to spend the night together in the bed. If they had tried to share the sofa, Saryu knew he would definitely make a move. It was easier to endure things at the edge of the bed. Saryu couldn't help but watch Sitoen as she got comfortable. She was so cute in the way she moved. He brought up the drink incident, telling Sitoen that it was probably just an accident. The butler might have mistaken her for another lady. Sitoen nodded and asked Saryu not to make a big deal out of it. But Saryu knew he had no more clues about what had happened. There was no point in causing Sitoen more anxiety or fear, especially since they were away from home. Still, he had already decided it would be his mission to protect her. He changed the subject, saying he had been thinking about speaking in Tanyan when they were alone. Sitoen looked at him, surprised by the suggestion. Of course, Saryu could only hold a basic conversation in the language, but he knew it was Sitoen's native tongue. Saryu smiled as Sitoen asked why he was so kind to her, but the answer was obvious to him. They were to be married soon after all. And then they found themselves gazing into each other's eyes. Was she really looking at him? Sitoen asked Saryu to look at her dragon mark, and Saryu hesitated, knowing its location. But to Sitoen, it was her pride and joy. Tidros was a country she loved, and she felt nothing but gratitude toward its people, who had shown respect and understanding toward her culture. She explained that she had learned firsthand that not all countries returned courtesy with courtesy, before apologizing for her words. But Saryu knew it couldn't be helped. She asked Saryu if there was anything he disliked, and he said nothing other than his mother and the crown prince. His words made Sitoen giggle. Sitoen asked if there was something he disliked, such as insects. And if someone had a tattoo of one, would he still dislike it? If she had something that he found psychologically off-putting, he surely couldn't come to like her. That was why she wanted him to look at her dragon mark. Then he could tell her if he hated it. Saryu was upset that Sitoen was trying to compare him to the man who had hated her tattoo. He wanted her to forget about that man completely. He told her that he and the prince were two different people, and his words saddened Sitoen as old memories came rushing back. She told Saryu that she had tried to love that man, and she had tried to respect him. But how could anyone forgive someone who treated them so cruelly? She asked Saryu to forgive her for what she had said. She recognized his hardships. If someone didn't care about her or even disliked her, it didn't hurt. Even if they rejected her, it still wouldn't hurt. But one person she never wanted to hate her was Saryu. Saryu couldn't believe her words. She told him that she thought very highly of him, and that she loved him for cherishing her. She could only hope that he might come to like her too. But she explained that if she disgusted him, then she would have no choice but to give up and stop trying. Saryu told her immediately that he could never come to hate her. But Sitoen said that was exactly why she needed him to see the dragon mark. If he thought it was disgusting, then she would move on. Saryu knew he was ready to see it. He told Sitoen to show him immediately. Saryu asked Sitoen to show him the mark as she looked into his eyes, tears falling from hers. She untied her nightgown as Saryu battled with his own thoughts. He knew that in order to see the mark, he would also have to see her chest. Deep down, he was curious about what the mark was, and even if it was something intense, he knew he would accept Sitoen regardless. He looked down to see nothing but a tiny mark on Sitoen's chest. It was so small it was barely visible. Saryu looked at Sitoen, not even sure what to say. It was definitely different from what he had imagined. He asked her if the crown prince, Arios, had also seen the mark, and Sitoen told him he didn't. She had offered to show him, but he refused. And then Saryu was overcome by anger. The prince must have been an idiot getting scared over a tattoo he hadn't even seen, and hurting Sitoen in the process. Saryu took a closer look at the mark. Something about it drew him in. It was warm, smooth, blue, and soft. He brushed his fingers against it, feeling a strange sensation. Saryu was so lost in the magic of the mark that he didn't realize how he was coming across to Sitoen, who was sitting awkwardly. Saryu snapped back to reality, jumping as far away from Sitoen as possible, apologizing like crazy. What made him think it was a good idea to put his hands on it? Sitoen asked if he was all right, noticing the sudden change in his demeanor. Saryu turned away from her, telling her he was fine but that she should keep her distance for now. As soon as he calmed down, he bowed in front of her, sincerely apologizing for touching her. But Sitoen told him that she should be the one to apologize for reacting that way toward his curiosity. She paused before asking if he thought her tattoo was disgusting. Saryu's eyes widened in disbelief as he quickly told her that it was nowhere near disgusting. In fact, it was the complete opposite for Saryu. He told her that if she came near him right now, he was quite sure he would attack her. He looked into her eyes, asking if she hated him for the confession. But to Saryu's surprise, Sitoen told him that she might like him even more now. Saryu was relieved to hear that she felt that way. He thought Sitoen was so cute, and it was clear now that they both liked each other. The only issue now was that Saryu couldn't make a move. He stayed head down on the floor, desperately trying not to disrespect the princess. He told her he would be happy to sleep at the edge of the bed and that she should go ahead and sleep first. He didn't even want to look at her face in order to avoid revealing his true desires for her. To Saryu's surprise, Citoyenne began to sing "Pain, Pain, Fly Away" to him, playfully placing her hand over his body. Was this girl a goddess or a demon? After 3 days of traveling, the party arrived at a roadside cafe. Saryu was asked by his attendants if he was alright, considering how distracted he looked. He had been sleeping by Citoyenne's side every night since he saw her mark, and of course he couldn't make a move. He would be lying if he said he wasn't frustrated. He looked over and saw Citoyenne in the sun, enjoying her time with her maid. Saryu wanted to join her. After days of carriage travel and dining with lords during breaks at Lawasser, Saryu had wanted to limit the people around her and let her enjoy her favorite sweets and tea. When they were alone in the bedroom, Citoyenne had told him that she felt relieved to be able to speak in her native language. Saryu knew she was happy, but of course there must be times when she wanted to be left alone. A servant approached Citoyenne with another treat. Saryu instantly worried whether the treat contained anything Citoyenne was allergic to. He had already informed all of the cafe staff, but he couldn't help but notice the knife in the server's pocket. Why did he have a knife if the one used for serving was already on the tray? Saryu instantly saw red. He screamed at the server to get away from Citoyenne, but he was too far away. Everything was unraveling in slow motion. The server put his hand on Citoyenne, who looked at Saryu in despair. Then the man reached into his pocket and raised his hand toward the princess. Saryu managed to wrestle the assassin, calling for his men to protect Citoyenne. Saryu knew that this was his moment. He was in protector mode, and he needed to defeat this man. He raised his sword as the assassin sprinted toward him. Saryu dodged the assassin's attempt to stab him, stepping back while gripping his sword tightly. The assassin pulled out a second dagger, and the two fought fiercely. Saryu soon realized the man's dual-wielding technique was a challenge, but he managed to overpower him with his bare hands. The man cried out as Saryu called for his men to bring a rope. In no time, the man was restrained, and Saryu's brother told him to turn around. Saryu looked over and saw Citoyenne, who wasted no time running into his arms. Her eyes were filled with tears as she asked if he was all right. She desperately checked to see if he was injured or hurt anywhere. Saryu smiled, telling her it was nothing. He wasn't called the Winter Bear for nothing. Citoyenne clung to him and he smiled as he held her close. Saryu's brother interrupted, asking if they should secure the second floor of the cafe as a waiting room, but Saryu had another idea. He instructed a few of his men to stay behind at the cafe to investigate the assassin's background. He knew it would be best for him and Citoyenne to get to Vandal's place as quickly as possible. Saryu called for Eaton, who scurried over. He picked up Citoyenne, whose legs had given out from the shock, and began walking toward the carriage. All Citoyenne could manage to say was that she was glad Saryu was safe. Saryu smiled, noticing how Citoyenne was constantly worried about him over herself. She asked again if he was really all right and begged him to promise he wouldn't die. Saryu cuddled her closer, telling her he wouldn't die, and neither would she. He told her the safest place in the country was in his arms, and that was exactly where she was now, so there was nothing for her to be afraid of. He promised that he would always be by her side, and that meant no one could hurt her. Despite Saryu's reassuring words, Citoyenne still looked overwhelmed by the event. She clung to Saryu tighter as he carried her. The party finally arrived at Count Sheen's territory, and he welcomed them all with open arms. Citoyenne and Saryu smiled. Vandal looked much better and told the two how light he felt. All thanks to Citoyenne, it was as if he had gained a new body. But Citoyenne was humble, telling Vandal that his health was the fruit of his own efforts. She smiled and asked if he had overcome his picky eating. But Vandal told her he hired a skilled chef who could make almost anything appealing. Like a child, Saryu chuckled. He got straight to the point, telling Vandal about the attack at the cafe. Afterwards, the waiter said nothing, biting off his tongue and taking his own life. Saryu wanted to cancel all of the evening galas at their lodging, but fearing strained relationships and not wanting to cause a fuss, Miss Citoyenne refused. So weapons were completely banned at the gala, a husband's reckless act of love for his dear wife. Saryu was prepared for people to think that, but somehow they accepted it on their own. Vandal told the two he had heard the details from Raoul. Things seemed to be taking a strange turn indeed. Vandal suggested they get to the main issue. It was about Lord Manda. He introduced Citoyenne and Saryu to a young man, and Vandal suggested they all sit. It turned out there was an exile from the Mira Empire. Vandal vouched for him, and His Majesty granted permission. Lord Manda was tasked with managing the exile district, but a mysterious illness had broken out there. Saryu needed to know what was going on. He asked his friend what type of illness it was, but of course, if anyone knew, Vandal would not have called it mysterious. All they knew was that there was no known treatment, and for now they could only isolate the patients in a building. Citoyenne reached for some tea and asked if it could be an infectious disease. Her words made everyone fall silent, and Vandel admitted he didn't know. But since many showed similar symptoms, they could not let them near general hospitals, especially if it was infectious. They asked for Miss Sitoen's advice, but Saryu refused on her behalf. He told Vandal he could not let her go, especially with the dangers out there. But Vandal told his friend that he had met the patients himself and was fine. Still, Saryu disagreed, arguing that the best course of action would be to observe for now. Vandal really disagreed, saying this was not the kind of issue that would end here. A mysterious illness occurring only in the exile district could lead to an outbreak which might result in civil unrest. In the worst-case scenario, the Mira Empire might invade. Lord Manda quoted, "An infectious disease broke out, so we burned the village for disinfection." Vandal asked Saryu if he knew what their duty was. It was to protect their nations. That was why they needed to handle this effectively but discreetly. Vandal told Saryu he planned to visit the capital under the pretext of celebrating his engagement and summon renowned physicians. But why request physicians? If word got out, it would invite unnecessary suspicion. The men continued to argue, but one thing was clear to Saryu. Sitoen was convenient for resolving this, wasn't she? Saryu gently asked what the symptoms were, and Sitoen called the men to sit down again. They did as they were told. Lord Manda told her the symptoms were diarrhea, stomach pain, and fatigue. Their skin turned blue, and in the end they died. Saryu was horrified, but Vandal understood how serious it was. The patients with diarrhea had apparently bought and eaten fish from a fishmonger. Sitoen asked if it could be food poisoning. Some people who ate it never developed symptoms, and some households were entirely wiped out, while in others only the men were affected. Sitoen asked if most patients were men, and Manda confirmed it was true. Sitoen continued to question him, asking if women ever ate the dried fish they discussed. Manda said it wasn't just men, exiles often ate it too. In the Mira Empire, dried sea fish was a staple. Many exiles were single men, and even after starting families, it wasn't uncommon for them to keep eating the food of their homeland, especially karis, which they ate more than bread. Sitoen and Saryu asked the Lord what he meant by karis, and Vandel explained it was a grain cooked with water and salt. With karis, those people could survive. Manda said it was a source of pride in their homeland. He asked the two what they thought, hoping for advice just as Sitoen had helped him before. Before Saryu could object, Sitoen volunteered. Saryu told her she could refuse and that she had every right to be scared. This disease seemed like no joke. But more than anything, Saryu was afraid of losing Miss Sitoen. If he could avoid putting her in danger, he would. But Sitoen was courageous as always, reminding Saryu that if her knowledge could save people, then she should offer it. And Saryu knew he couldn't say another word when she made that face. All he could do was protect his fiancée. The others stood and smiled, relieved to have Sitoen on board. So the four got straight to work, visiting the relatives of those affected. They took precautionary measures such as wearing masks and gloves. Sitoen spoke with a woman whose husband was affected. She asked the woman if her husband had eaten any dried fish, and the woman said he had, her eyes filled with tears. Her name was Natalie, and she had married her husband just last year. Since her husband developed symptoms and was quarantined at home, Natalie visited every day to care for him. Sitoen asked if her husband still said his stomach hurt or if he could eat anything. Natalie told her he could only drink the soup she made. Sitoen asked if other patients could only drink soup, but Natalie didn't know. She said that when people usually got stomach problems, they made karis porridge, but she didn't know how to make it. Instead, she made pork and onion soup that her mother back home had taught her. She added thinly sliced garlic and gave it to her husband to drink. Sitoen smiled and told her they should go and meet her husband. Saryu asked Vandel if that was all right, but Sitoen advised them privately not to touch anything. She told them that infectious diseases spread through mucous membranes, so they should not rub their eyes or remove their scarves. She added that there was still a possibility this was not an infectious disease. They knocked on the door, and a man sat up in bed. He looked extremely weak and pale. Sitoen introduced herself, and Natalie told her husband that Lord Manda and Lord Vandel had brought these people. Natalie told him that Sitoen was skilled in medicine, and that he might be saved now. Sitoen asked to take the husband's pulse before diagnosing that he was tachycardic. She then asked to see his legs, which were swollen and inflamed. Sitoen asked if his legs cramped often, and Natalie said he often woke in the middle of the night saying they did. Sitoen told him to lie down with his ankles slightly elevated so the swelling would reduce, but the man said when he lay down his breathing became difficult. It was easier when he was upright. Orthopnea, Sitoen muttered to herself. Everything was beginning to make sense in her mind. The diarrhea, stomach pain, characteristic elevated pulse, swelling, and cyanosis. She wondered if this meant what she thought it did. Sitoen asked Natalie if she had any karis, and Natalie said she would fetch some. When she left, Sitoen asked the husband if he had been eating karis all along. The man said he had, even after going into exile. When they had no money, sometimes that was all they had. In fact, until he married Natalie, he hardly ate any meat. He looked down and began to mutter something. He asked if he was really going to die. Citoyen looked him in the eye as he began to break down. He told her how he couldn't leave Natalie behind, how he didn't want to die. Then Saryu dropped to one knee in front of the man's bed. He told the man that what he said was true. He couldn't die. He had such a great wife, and even if he did die, he couldn't rest in peace. Saryu told him he felt the same way. If something unexpected happened and his heart stopped, what would happen to Citoyen? Imagine if she finally came to this country and felt a sense of relief only for her husband to die. If that happened, there probably wouldn't be any remarriage talks. Above all, Citoyen would be depressed thinking it was her fault. And even if he wanted to tell her otherwise and comfort her, he couldn't do that if he was dead. He took the man's hand and told him he would live, out of spite. Saryu looked him in the eyes and told him not to think about dying, but to think only about living. Tears streamed down the man's face and Saryu pulled him into a hug. He told him to stop crying since his wife would be back soon. The man apologized and pulled himself together. Vandal reminded Saryu to keep his distance, and Saryu looked at Citoyen hoping he wouldn't get scolded. But Citoyen gave him an encouraging smile. He remembered how Citoyen had also touched the man to take his pulse, and assumed that by covering his mouth it would be fine. Natalie returned, passing Citoyen the caress. Citoyen opened the sack, and as she thought it contained grains of white rice. She told the group that she believed this was a disease called beriberi. It was caused by vitamin B1 deficiency, which leads to general fatigue and loss of appetite, leg swelling, and sensory paralysis. If it gets worse, it can lead to heart failure and brain disorders. Of course, Citoyen might as well have been speaking another language, as the men had no idea. Citoyen asked Lord Manda if the food was hulled and polished rice. Manda agreed, and Citoyen explained that when rice is processed, the vitamin elements in the bran are removed. In other words, the important nutrients are stripped away. Saryu asked if this meant the karas was unbalanced, and Citoyen confirmed it was true. Continuing to eat karas caused vitamin B1 deficiency. The dried fish upset his stomach and expelled even the remaining nutrients. His strength declined, his meals didn't progress, and the necessary vitamins didn't come in. As a result, he developed cardiac beriberi, and people continued to die. But this man was able to consume vitamin B1 by drinking his wife's soup. Citoyen explained that pork is rich in vitamin B1, and combining it with onions and garlic increases absorption. So thanks to his wife's soup, Natalie's husband's body was just able to hold on. Citoyen's words made Natalie smile as tears rushed to her eyes. She asked Citoyen if this meant her husband could get better. Citoyen smiled and suggested that they all work hard together. Natalie rushed to hug her husband, making Saryu smile from ear to ear. Manda asked if this meant the disease was not contagious, and Citoyen confirmed that it was not. Vandal approached Citoyen and bowed, expressing gratitude to her on behalf of the people. Citoyen smiled, telling him that she just did what she could. Vandal expressed his respect to the two, knowing they were frightened yet still believed his words and followed him. The room erupted into shock when he called Saryu a prince. Vandal went on to say that by holding the hand of a patient showing unknown symptoms and encouraging them, Saryu had done something not everyone could. Saryu smiled, but Citoyen slightly scolded him for being reckless. Saryu sheepishly apologized, but Citoyen smiled. She told him that she could heal diseases to some extent, but she could not heal human nature. She told Saryu that she admired his kindness. Saryu looked into his fiancé's eyes as she spoke her kind words. Vandal told them to save it for later. They needed to get out of here now. As I thought, you haven't really changed at all, echoed in Saryu's mind. The couple came to the palace to thank Citoyen and Saryu once again, and they smiled, seeing the husband make a speedy recovery. But the man mentioned that he had no idea Saryu was a prince. Saryu laughed, telling the man to cut it out. He asked the man to agree that they would both cherish their wives. After that, Citoyen and Saryu decided to head back, seeing most patients make a full recovery. But Vandal was quick to stop them. He wanted to offer them both a gift as thanks for everything. Saryu laughed, requesting anything but a whale as a joke. He told Vandal that he appreciated the sentiment, but they needed to get back quickly. But Citoyen held her hand up. She admitted that there was a shop she was curious about. Both men agreed that they should visit the shop immediately, pleased that there was something they could do to make the lady happy. The shop was a small boutique selling beautiful china tea sets, jewels, and bags. Citoyen smiled as she walked in, impressed by the gorgeous selection. Saryu curiously picked up a glass and asked Vandal if he gave him something like this. Vandal told him that he made sure to include it in Saryu's engagement gift package, which took up most of the table. He called Saryu rude as a joke, considering he had not even opened most of them yet. Citoyen spoke with the shop assistant who helped her pick out a plate. Among Lord Vandal's congratulatory gifts there was beautiful tableware. Citoyen explained that the queen and crown princess had been so kind to her she really wanted to gift them something. Saryu smiled, Noticing that Situen had not come to this store to find something for herself, but instead for her mother and sister-in-law, Vandal whispered that he would cover the cost, and Saryu yelled at him for breathing down his ear. Vandal smiled, explaining he just did not want Saryu to worry about the money, and he wanted to say thanks anyway. Saryu told him it was fine, he was already handling all of their security anyway. The shop assistant smiled, telling Situen that she would wrap the gifts up. Both Vandal and Saryu rushed to pay, but Situen insisted that if they did, it would not really be a gift from her. Vandal suggested that Situen ask for some jewelry from Saryu, and Saryu looked at him like he wanted to kill him. Situen smiled, telling them she did not need anything, but Saryu insisted for Situen to let him buy her a gift. Vandal smirked, proud of his friend for his chivalry. The shop assistant whispered to Situen, suggesting she accept the offer. They both giggled as the men argued. So Saryu surprised Situen with some beautiful jewelry. He did not mind at all, as seeing Situen happy was all he cared about. Shopping together did feel quite refreshing. Situen asked Saryu if the earrings came in different colors, yellow and blue supposedly. She asked him which ones he thought were better. Saryu's eyes widened with no idea what to say. He began to panic, and Situen looked carefully at his response. He had never picked out women's earrings before. Saryu told Situen that yellow was lovely, but blue would suit her very well. The store assistant and Vandal smiled in approval. 10 minutes passed and the three stood patiently waiting. But then another 15 minutes passed and the sun was beginning to go down. The assistant asked Saryu what exactly he was struggling with. Vandal blurted that with Situen's current outfit, yellow might work out to be the best. But then he hesitated, remembering that Situen often wore blue, so maybe the blue ones would be more suitable. Not to mention it was almost summer, and the tableware Situen picked earlier was a shade of blue. He suggested that maybe she would like blue, and Vandal told him he paid really close attention to whatever Situen did or wore. The store assistant stepped in to help, suggesting blue might be best for the coming season. Saryu had no idea. 1 minute he thought blue was perfect, the next yellow. Another 15 minutes passed and Saryu finally decided on blue. Everyone sighed in relief. When Saryu's attendant Raoul came to sort out the payment, he suggested for Saryu to buy both in this case. Saryu cried, knowing that Raoul had been watching his struggle for the past hour when he could have just said that. He took a breath and told everyone Raoul was right. But he then suggested if a necklace and ring would be appropriate too. Saryu cried out once again, Raoul was right, he should have thought of that, and he called himself an idiot. He was literally a prince. Why did he even need to decide one piece over another? Situen caught his eye and told him blue was fine, just the blue earrings. She smiled radiantly, telling everyone that the prince choosing something for her made her really happy. She admitted she wanted Saryu to choose for her, and it was not about wanting other things. Situen thanked him again with a big grin on her face. Vandal told Situen she was really selfless and touched Saryu's back in approval. Saryu snapped at him to stop touching him up. The day of shopping finally finished and the couple left Count Shin's territory that evening. On the way back to the capital, Saryu caught Situen's maid's eye. He leapt off his horse, checking that everything was okay. When he entered the carriage, his heart dropped. Situen was sitting weakly, drenched in sweat. Saryu gasped, seeing his lady looking seriously ill. He began to panic as the maid shouted, asking if there was anywhere Situen could rest. Saryu called for Raoul to find an inn close by. He then turned to Situen to ask her what was wrong, or if she had too much to drink. Situen told him no, looking up weakly. The maid told Saryu that Situen's monthly thing was heavy, and the carriage's constant shaking was hard on her body. Saryu looked up, asking what that was. The maid looked at Saryu harshly for being an idiot. She told him it was what happened every month to a woman. Saryu then added everything up and calmed down immediately. He apologized for his ignorance but asked what he should do to help Situen. Situen told him that there was some medicine she could take, and if she took it and slept for a while she would feel better. Saryu looked like he had just been given a mission. He knew he needed to find a comfortable place for Situen and began to panic. He ran towards Raoul for some help in the matter. The carriage came to a halt and Saryu's men explained that the nearest inn had poor security, not to mention the next lodging was far away. They asked if Situen was suffering from morning sickness. Saryu looked down and explained that it was a woman-specific thing, a monthly thing for that matter. The men looked at Saryu wide-eyed. They quickly understood and fretted over what they should do, panicking just as much as Saryu. One of them asked if moving for the whole day was a bad idea, explaining his wife was usually down for 3 whole days when hers came. Saryu had to think quickly. He decided to camp out in this exact spot and ordered his men to close off the highway. Another began to build a tent in preparation for the camp out. Night fell, but by that time Saryu had arranged for a large luxurious tent for Situen. She woke up in a makeshift bed asking Saryu where they were. Saryu smiled, asking if she remembered that they were inside a tent. Situen admitted that she did not, resting her head on her pillow. Her maid was horrified by the idea of Situen sleeping outdoors, complaining it was a harsh environment for the young lady. but Saryu had made it as comfortable as he could with a cozy rug and carpet. He turned to the maid to ask her about the type of medicine she was giving to Sitoen. The maid told him that it was mostly sleeping drugs. Saryu asked if there was anything better, like a cure or something, but the maid growled that there was no such thing as a cure. She rubbed Sitoen's back, and Saryu wondered if that gave her some type of relief. So Saryu crawled onto the bed next to Sitoen and attempted to rub her back. He asked if he was at the right spot, but she said no almost immediately. It was not like Sitoen to be so blunt. She instructed him to move his hand lower and to push hard. After some confusion, Saryu thought to himself how Sitoen was usually very polite, but now she was being quite straight to the point. Was she still groggy from the medicine? Sitoen instructed him to go lower and press harder, and Saryu began to sweat. He did not want to disrespect Sitoen by going any lower, but when he hit the spot, she breathed out of relief. Saryu moved his hand away quickly, thinking that was it, but Sitoen pleaded for him not to stop. Saryu had to take a breath and continue massaging her back. It seemed to be helping, but Saryu definitely needed to focus to avoid getting distracted by feeling Sitoen's body. It did not help that she was asking him to press harder, telling him it felt good. Sitoen eventually felt sleepy, and Saryu tucked her into bed. It took a matter of minutes for Sitoen to fall asleep, but before she did, she began to speak in another language. Saryu had never heard this language before and looked over at Sitoen curiously. "Detsuhito," she said. Tears began to fall from her eyes. She said it again, and Saryu rushed to hold her hand. He told Sitoen he now understood. Sitoen fell for something inside of him, not for him. Saryu walked through the hallways of Hedna Lord's mansion. He was told that until the princess's health recovered, he should stay at the house for as many nights as he wanted. Saryu thanked Lord Hedna, explaining that they were supposed to stay overnight yesterday, but to think they had even sent guards for them. Lord Hedna smiled, telling him to think nothing of it. It turned out that the rumors were spreading all across the kingdom, and he heard that Saryu saved the people of Count Shin's territory. Saryu told him how Sitoen possessed a wide range of knowledge. He was told it seemed like he truly cherished Sitoen, stopping the carriage and setting up camp just because she felt unwell. Surely no princess had ever been so loved. Saryu looked down as he thought about Sitoen. It was true that he really did care about her. He wanted to cherish her and love her. They arrived at Sitoen's room, and Saryu quietly went in. It was there that Sitoen was resting. Atsuhito was definitely a man's name, he thought as he watched over her. He wondered if Atsuhito also saw that sleepy face. She complained how it hurt in her sleep, and she kept repeating that name. Saryu asked if she was okay, as memories flashed before his eyes of Sitoen. He wondered if it was all right if he fell even more in love with her. He held his hands together and told Sitoen he was in love with her, but she was fast asleep. Saryu knew she was his only one. Two men knocked on the door of the Crown Prince of Luminous's office. It was the Chancellor, and the prince was hoping he had brought his father's reply. But the Chancellor told him he would talk to him about that another day. The prince was confused why his father would let Mail and him have their wedding ceremony, and on top of that tell him not to bring Mail along whenever he went out. The Chancellor thought to himself how the prince had his father's practical skills and his mother's looks. He used to be the crown prince of the Luminous Kingdom, a man they could proudly present anywhere. However, with a consort candidate like that, there was nothing to be done. The prince said that Mail and the noble daughters were having a tea party in the garden, exhausted from their daily princess lessons. They needed a breather. He thought the prince had kicked Lady Siroan out because he wanted to become crown princess himself. He presented a tray explaining this was the reason why he came today. The prince read through the letter on the tray only to find that it was actually an invitation for Sitoen and Sirius's wedding. They asked what his father had said, and he was told that his father left the decision to him. He had also given permission to bring Lady Mail. The prince smiled, happy to attend. Come to think of it, he did pity Sitoen, so the least he could do was give her his blessing. The Chancellor sighed, knowing the prince had no right to pity Sitoen in the first place, let alone want to give her his blessing. He asked if the prince was aware of the rumors regarding Lady Sitoen, and the prince asked what he was talking about. He asked if their engagement was already falling apart and said that he thought the Bear Prince had grown disgusted by Sitoen's appearance. He told him that she was always such a gloomy shut-in, never laughing brightly like Mail. Nor did she enjoy high society. But the Chancellor knew that was because the prince kept her locked away, and naturally socializing felt like work to her. He calmly told the prince that Sitoen was highly capable and that Prince Saryu doted on her. The prince's eyes widened in shock. They continued, saying Sitoen had cured an epidemic disease plaguing the kingdom, and King Tidros was deeply moved and expressed his gratitude to the Kingdom of Tanya. On top of that, the two nations were developing a trade route for mineral resources. The prince could not believe it. He had always seen Sitoen as nothing more than a strange woman, and they asked if he was referring to the dragon crest. But the Chancellor asked the prince if he had ever actually seen the crest on her body. The Chancellor admitted he had seen one before, not Sitoen's, but through an acquaintance. He had been granted the honor of viewing the dragon crest of a certain noble personage. The prince asked if it looked like scales, like a hideous lizard, but the chancellor said no. It was 4 marks like a cherry blossom, no larger than a pinky fingernail. That person bore the crest on their calf if male, and if female the marks were smaller, at most 2. The prince stared at him, utterly gobsmacked. He asked the chancellor why he had not told him this sooner. And then the chancellor snapped, saying it was because everyone was too scared to even speak of it. One must never speak of its form, or of seeing it. The dragon crest's existence was noble and holy. He asked if the prince did not understand the honor of being gifted such a thing. And yet he threw it all away, so foolish that the chancellor had no choice but to spell it out for him. Eventually the chancellor took a breath and excused himself, but the prince was left completely clueless as to what to do next. He asked his man what could be done, since no amount of pleading could quell the king of Tanya's rage. It was hopeless, but the man told him he had already taken measures. If she could not belong to their kingdom, then he would ensure she belonged to no one. Once Saryu and Situen returned to the capital, Saryu was immediately swallowed up by the hectic days. He met with the king and his brothers, and Situen attended meetings and tea parties with the ladies. Between wedding preparations, formal greetings, and arranging security during all of it, they worked at a furious pace. Months flew by in the blink of an eye. Yet Saryu could not help but wonder who Atsuhito was. The words he wanted to say to her were burning inside him, and he felt like he needed to know. Not only that, but Saryu also wanted to tell Situen how he was feeling. Things kept getting in the way and time seemed to pass too quickly, and then it was the day before the wedding. Saryu mustered up the courage to knock on Situen's door. She asked who it was, and she immediately came to the door to find Saryu looking down at her. She smiled warmly and invited him in. Saryu asked Situen if she was busy, and she said no, she had only been writing a letter. Since returning to the capital, they had slept in separate rooms. But when it was just the two of them, especially during their evening talks, Lady Situen began to speak more casually with him. She suggested asking Maid Eaton to prepare some tea for them, but Saryu told her it would not take long. He only wanted to talk for a bit. Situen waited patiently as Saryu began. He admitted he had thought maybe it was best not to ask, but he wanted to say this clearly before they got married. Situen's face dropped, and she instantly asked if everything was all right. Saryu smiled reassuringly, then asked if she remembered the time she fell ill on the way back from the Vandal estate. While she was hazy from the medicine, she had said a name, Atsuhito. He asked her if it was a person's name and whether this person perhaps looked like Saryu. He felt his hands grow sweaty as he nervously awaited her reply. He asked her if she loved Atsuhito and not him. Situen looked clearly upset, and both of them fell silent. After what felt like forever, Situen told Saryu something he never expected. She told him that she had memories of her past life. Saryu asked Situen if she was talking about reincarnation, when she said she could remember her past life. Situen explained that in her homeland, the kingdom of Tanya, people believed that souls were reborn over and over. She told Saryu she had been born in a different world in her previous life, and she had grown into an adult there. She worked as a physician, spending her days busy in a hospital. Atsuhito was her lover in that past life. He could make friends with anyone instantly, but he cared for his patients more than anyone else. Even though he was assigned to the operating room, he was always wandering around the wards. The head nurse was always scolding him, but one day a woman brutally beaten by her husband was rushed into the emergency room. While they were treating her, her husband went into a frenzy, barged in wielding a knife, and Atsuhito protected her. Sadly, he was killed. Saryu looked down, saddened by the story. He asked Situen why she had been so worried when he rushed in to protect her that time. Situen told him she died shortly after Atsuhito from the wound she had sustained. And when she woke up, she was living as Situen Barrymore. She did not have the memories at first, but when she turned 16, they returned after she nearly died from eating too much peach. When she first saw Saryu, she thought her heart stopped. Saryu asked if it was because he resembled Atsuhito. He asked if that was why she fell for him. But Situen began to tear up, and Saryu knew he needed to stop. He told her not to worry, that it did not matter what made her call him by her past lover's name. He had not intended to upset her, he had only been curious. Situen looked up at Saryu and asked if he would listen. He smiled and said yes. He explained that he had been happy to hear she liked him, but if the reason was because he looked like the man she loved in her past life, he felt he would have gotten excited over nothing. Situen told him it was not that. Saryu said he thought he understood how she felt, that even after being reborn, that man must have still been someone so important to her that he appeared in her dreams. If someone showed up looking like him, he understood. He asked if it had been painful for her. He knew he could not ask her to forget someone that important. He knew it was impossible, but still. Saryu formed a fist before taking a breath. He asked Situen to look at him. She looked up, and Saryu told her that it did not have to be now, but whenever she was ready. When that man faded from her heart even just a little, he wanted her to see him. He decided he would work hard to make her fall in love with him for real. Saryu bowed his head and let out a sigh of relief. Speaking to her was not as hard as he thought. It was painful for sure, but his feelings had not changed. He knew he only needed to put in the effort until Sitoen loved him back. And today was a new day for that. But to his surprise, Sitoen told him he had it wrong. She looked at Saryu as tears streamed down her face. Saryu began to panic, asking Sitoen if he truly did not stand a chance and if her past lover was unforgettable. He looked down in sadness, but to his relief she said no. She walked toward Saryu and told him that she loved him. Saryu could not believe it. She loved him? He collapsed onto his knees. Sitoen sat on the ground with him and she admitted she had once thought that both men were similar. In fact, at first she believed she was looking for Atsuhito through him, but she knew Prince Saryu had only ever looked at her. He always believed her words and he stayed by her side even when things were hard. Memories of him carrying her to safety and telling her there was nothing to fear crossed her mind, especially. In her eyes, she could see no one but him. Sitoen held her hand up and told Saryu this was from back then. Looking at the earrings, she remembered how she felt when she saw him choosing them so earnestly. Her chest had felt warm, and it was then that she realized that she loved him. No one else, just him. Saryu's eyes widened, and Sitoen told him once again that she loved him. He looked into her eyes as she anxiously awaited his response, and he told her that he loved her too. He leaned in and kissed her for the very first time. Saryu leaned in and kissed Sitoen again, and she fell back onto the floor. He crawled over her body, admiring her beauty, but she seemed like something was on her mind. Saryu asked her if she was scared before he gently kissed her neck. He reached out and gently touched her body, feeling her soft skin. Just as he looked into her eyes to kiss her again, there was a voice. The voice said that he was sorry, but he couldn't seem to find the young master. Saryu instantly recognized the voice to be Thart of the steward. He held his finger to his mouth, trying to gesture to Sitoen not to make a sound. But the steward asked Sitoen if she was with Saryu. They kept calling his name, trying to work out where Saryu could have got to, and then Saryu told them he was coming. He opened the door and the steward laughed, telling Saryu he really couldn't take his eyes off him. Sitoen smiled innocently from behind before Saryu was dragged out of her room. Meanwhile, the governor thought to himself in the office. He had already failed twice, but he decided that tomorrow was the perfect opportunity to make Sitoen disappear, before Tidros realizes the secret of the dragon crest. The next day was the day of the wedding ceremony. Sitoen and Saryu stood side by side, Saryu's parents smiling warmly, and his brother Seven shedding a tear, as did Maid Eaton. Saryu held his hands out to remove Sitoen's veil, and he looked into her eyes. She looked so happy she was beginning to tear up. And then Saryu leaned in and kissed Sitoen. The ceremony went off without a hitch, and more citizens than Saryu could ever imagine came out to bless them during the parade. The reception was next, which was to be held at the royal court. Saryu and Sitoen walked in and they were greeted by a couple of people. Saryu asked Sitoen if she was feeling alright, and she seemed to perk up. She told Saryu she was fine, and more importantly, he didn't need to call her lady anymore. The idea of that seemed strange to Saryu, and she laughed, noticing his hesitance. He was greeted by Vandal, who was super excited to see his best friend married. He rushed over to Saryu to go in for a hug, but of course he was met with Saryu's hand. Meanwhile, Lord Manda made his way to Sitoen to congratulate her on her marriage. She asked him how things have been since, after thanking him. Manda told her that thanks to her, everyone is regaining their strength. He figured out that the Mira Empire was also struggling with that illness, so he was sharing what they already knew. Of course he was aiming for something of equal value in return. And Manda told Vandal that he was looking forward to reporting the results. They waved goodbye to Sitoen and Saryu, but then two guests arrived who caused quite a stir. It was the prince and Mile. Saryu was not happy to see them, and the prince was pretty arrogant over the fact he got invited, thinking it was Sitoen's excuse to show him how happy she was now. Saryu apologized to Sitoen, but she told him it was fine. They should focus on continuing to be happy. The prince approached Sitoen and Saryu, bowing and congratulating them. Saryu was surprised he could actually do it, and he wasn't just a foolish crown prince. To Sitoen's surprise, Mail rushed over and embraced her, telling her that her dress was lovely. Of course, her touching Sitoen made everyone suspicious of her, and she was tackled down in seconds. Saryu asked them to calm down, telling them it was just a greeting. Sitoen told Mail it had been a long time, smiling warmly. Saryu sighed, noticing that Mail hadn't changed a bit. The prince told Mail to greet them properly, so Mail walked over and curtsied. Saryu wondered why she looked so proud. She even called Saryu Mr. Bear. Mail turned to look at Sitoen's necklace in admiration, and Sitoen explained it was a gift from King Tanya from their wedding. Mail was mesmerized, but her passive-aggressive remarks didn't end there. She had the balls to say that the necklace was almost too good for Lady Sitoen. Saryu was seriously losing patience, asking Mail if she intended to insult his wife. But then Sitoen said she was right, it was a gift from Tanya, and that she heard that Mael's country's mineral trade with Tanya was suspended. That made Mael's eyes open in embarrassment. She added that they will never see high-grade ore like this enter the Luminous Kingdom ever again. Saryu tried not to laugh, cheekily adding that they could sell some jewels to the couple if they wanted. The prince went red and pulled Mael out of the way. When they left, all of Saryu's men burst out laughing, telling them how the princess and captain certainly had sharp tongues, and that much was appropriate for such rude people. Sitoen began to sweat, hoping that what she said wasn't too mean. Saryu asked Arios if he saw that the Sitoen who just took his insults had gone, for Saryu knew she was strong and beautiful too, but of course the prince was infuriated that he had been publicly humiliated.